יש, הגאולה מתקדמת. גאולה מתקדמת, כפי שבאמת ראינו שמלחמת העולם הראשונה הביאה, First World War brought the Balfour Declaration, the international recognition of the right of the Jewish people to establish a national homeland, national home in Eretz Israel. Second World War brought the state of Israel. The Yom Kippur War, the Six-Day War brought of course, the liberation of Yerushalayim, Judea, Samaria, Golan, Sinai, and the Yom Kippur, Bik'at HaYarden, Yericho, and of course, Yom Kippur War brought the movement of settlements. It didn't exist before the Yom Kippur War, so we really can see that there were, during the 20th century, there were 4 wars. 2 of them, the first 2 were world wars, and the other 2, and 3 of the state of Israel, War of Independence, brought the state, War of Six-Day War and the Yom Kippur War. Each war promoted, brought the Am Israel to a higher level in terms of kibbutz galuyot, in terms of the land, in terms of the geula, the redemption. מתעורר כוח משיח. So let's continue reading. עת הזמיר הגיע, זמיר עריצים, הרשעים נכחדים מן העולם, וכל התור נשמע בארצנו. The war brings death to the wicked nations. The powers of evil are defeated in the war. And indeed, in the World War I and II, Germany, Nazism, and fascism were defeated. In the wars of Israel, the Arabs were defeated. Those are forces of evil, and they are defeated. God promised us that in the time of redemption, הרשעים נכחדים מן העולם. The people of Israel will prevail in these wars. But we know that in these wars, the people of Israel prevails. Geula, the process of Geula, comes to a higher and higher levels. But there are righteous people, righteous Jews, who are killed in the Holocaust, World War I, in the Yom Kippur War, in the Six-Day War. Righteous people were killed. Not only the wicked, but also righteous people die. So what's the meaning? What's the explanation? And here comes the explanation of Rav Kook regarding the death of the righteous in the war. היחידים, third line, היחידים הנספים בלא משפט, שבתוך המהפכה של שטף המלחמה, יש בה ממידת מיתת צדיקים המחפרת. עולים הם למעלה בשורש החיים, ועצמות חייהם מביאה ערך כללי לטובה ולברכה אל כלל בניין העולם בכל ערכיו ומובניו.
כיצד?
There is the death of the righteous in the war is also part. It brings, it is a part of the process of the Geula. It contributes. There is value to their death. Their death contributes to the process of the Geula. This sentence, this idea that the death of righteous people in the war contributes, has a contribution, substantial, meaningful contribution to the Tahalich HaGeula, to the process of redemption, can be understood in two ways. One, mystical, מיתת צדיקים המכפרת. It brings atonement to the people of Israel.
מה זה atonement?
כפרה. עצמות חייהם מביאה ערך כללי לטובה ולברכה אל כלל בניין העולם. It can be interpreted mystically, but I think that there is at least partly a rational explanation. Those righteous people who die in war, sometimes, at least sometimes, their personality, their character, their contribution becomes known only through their death. Without their death, maybe no one, or at least few people, could hear or could know their personality, could know their their quality only through their death. People know. Just few examples. I had...
יש מאמר מאוד יפה של הרב זיקה חיים.
מי?
הרב זיקה חיים. במיתת צדיקים.
מחפרת.
שירת האומה לארצה בסוף. לא שירת האומה, זה הספר הראשון שלו. כותב שם, הוא מסתמך שם, יש שם, המקור שלו ירושלמי, הוא מביא שם ירושלמי, יום האלף א', הוא מביא שם כמה הסברים על מיתת צדיקים מחפרת.
כן, אבל I want to give it a very rational explanation that through the death of righteous people, many other people come to know their teachings, their midot, their quality. Just few examples. I had a student, Emmanuel Moreno. No one knew about him. Just, he was absolutely unknown. He didn't tell about what he did in the army, his bravery, his courage, his emunah, his motivation for Am Israel. No one knew about him. And maybe if he were alive, maybe until this day, no one would have known about him. Only through his death, he became known to Am Israel. His friends told about his courage, about his emunah, about his midot, about his unique personality. He had a very unique combination of great courage and great emunah, great faith. And it became known only through his death. Another example is I had a friend in Kerem B'Yavne who was killed in the Yom Kippur War. His name Dov Indig. he wrote letters to a girl in Kibbutz Ramat Yochanan. She had questions about Yahadut. She was interested in understanding more about Yahadut. And just a second. And I'm not exaggerating. Hundreds of thousands of people have read this book, his letters. And for me, it's kind of a miracle that only through his death he had such a great influence on so many people. So what Rav Kook says is that there is, even death of the righteous people in the world has contribution to the process of Geula, to the process of Tshuva, to the process of Emunah. It's hard, sometimes it's hard to say it. My wife also always tells me that. But I'm saying, don't say it to the parents of your friends, of those who were killed. They can't absorb it. It's hard for them to accept it. But I really feel that there is a kind of contribution to those who died, that without their death, probably their influence was not the same.
איתן הנקין, אותו דבר.
I was going to say just Yom Kippur, or Rosh Hashanah, many of the people that have been niftar have been great neshamot. You know, heard most women been Rabbanim.
But it's only
Really
part of the
impactful.
explanation. We have to probably Rav Kook
more.
has more.
But it also makes Kiddush Hashem in the world too, because
Right.
of it, because
There is Kiddush Hashem in the world. The fact that the Jewish people shows its commitment, shows its devotion to Hashem, even in spite of pain and agony and so on. Right? There is dimension of Kiddush Hashem. So it has different aspects, but what's important is that we have to know, the main idea is גאולה מתקדמת דרך מלחמה. There's no other way. No other way to promote this process without wars interwoven in this process. ואכן הוא אומר, ואחר כך, כתום, what happens in the end? ואחר כך, אני מזמין את קצת מים בבקשה. ואחר כך, יופי, תודה. ואחר כך, כתום המלחמה, תודה רבה. ואחר כך, תודה. כתום המלחמה, in the end of the war, מתחדש העולם ברוח חדש, ורגלי משיח מתגלים ביותר. There is new spirit, a new atmosphere after the war. It's really, it's amazing that it is so true. Just who could imagine before World War I that right after the war, the whole world would recognize the right of the Jewish people to establish its homeland in Eretz Israel? Who could imagine that? And it happened after the war. So there was a new spirit, new atmosphere after the war that enabled it. After the Holocaust, after the War of Independence. ורגלי משיח מתגלים ביותר. Mashiach again is the force of redemption. Force of redemption is revealed through the war. רגלי משיח מתגלים ביותר, ולפי ערכה של גודל המלחמה, חמותה ואיכותה, ככה תגדל הציפייה לרגלי משיח שבה. The stronger is the war, the more terrible is, the more ferocious is the war, the more it promotes the process. So we don't have to be scared of even a terrible war. Because we know that World War I brought the Balfour Declaration and the British Mandate. World War II brought the State of Israel. The Second War was more terrible, much more terrible than the first one, but the effect, it promoted the process of redemption even more than the first one. כן.
רציתי לשאול אותך, אני בעוונות למדתי קצת בפילוסופיה יהודית באוניברסיטה, התייחסנו לרב קוק, המרצה הנכבד אמר שזה הקטע היחידי שהרב קוק מדבר כאילו על חיוביותה של המלחמה, כאילו הקטע היחיד המיליטנטי כביכול, כידוע אתה יודע מה האוריינטציה של המרצים באוניברסיטה. כן. אז מה אתה אומר על זה?
What I have to say, what Rav Avraham says, that it is this chapter has ideas, includes ideas which philosophers regard as nationalist or even fascist. It legitimizes war. What I have to say is that Rav Kook says he wrote this chapter, he wrote these paragraphs during World War I, 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago. He did not see as we know, as we see the wars of the 20th century. But what he wrote here is exactly what happened.
רגע, הוא כתב את זה, אתה אומר, לפני, אחרי...
במהלך מלחמה, during World War I.
לא, השנייה.
כתב את זה במהלך מלחמת העולם הראשונה.
הראשונה הוא כתב.
הוא עוד לא ידע על הצהרת בלפור כשהוא כותב את זה. הוא כותב את זה בשוויץ, במהלך מלחמת העולם הראשונה. During World War I. So these are words of, from my point of view, of prophecy, not less than that. He speaks as a prophet. What you have to know, you are going into a century of terrible wars. Millions of Jews will be killed. So I want to tell you, this is a word of a message of consolation, of hope. In spite of those terrible wars, you have to know that this is the way of Hashem to promote the process of Geula, of redemption. And there is no other way. By the way, the Bavli, במגילה י"ז, נדמה לי, there is a saying of the sages, מלחמות נמי התחלת דגאולה. There is a connection between גאולה and מלחמות.
מגילה מה?
גאולה נמי התחלת דגאולה.
איזה מגילה מה?
מגילה י"ז, נדמה לי. בבלי, לא ירושלים, בבלי. לא כל כך יודע.
נמי מה?
נמי, מלחמות נמי התחלת דגאולה. Rav Kook, by the way, brings the famous, he brings a sentence from the תפילה. בסוף הקטע, אנחנו קוראים, מביא את הקטע, בעל מלחמות, זה מתחיל עם מלחמות, זורע צדקות, מצמיח ישועות. ישועות באות, זה מתחיל עם מלחמות, ורק לאט לאט באות ישועות, רפואות, נורא תהילות, אדון הנפלאות, המחדש בטובו בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית, ניסים שמתרחשים,
אור חדש על ציון תאיר ונזכה כולנו במהרה לאורו. האור החדש של ציון הוא מתוך מלחמות. כלומר, זה כתוב בתפילה. מה שהרב קוק עושה, what he does, is to make these sentences of Chazal, to apply them to what's going on in the 20th century. This is the time. Time has come for Geula, and that's why we are going into a century of terrible wars. But the result of these wars will be Geula. The result will not be destruction. Those who will die in these wars, their death is not in vain. It is part, and they have to know that it is part of Geula. And it's a chapter of hope, a chapter of, it's hope which is expressed before the wars. It prepares, it's kind of preparation for the upcoming wars. So let's read, אני חוזר כמה שורות בחזרה. מלחמת עולם של עכשיו, כותב את זה ב-1915, מלחמת the first world war, מלחמת עולם של עכשיו, צפייה נוראה, גדולה ועמוקה יש בה. מצורף לכל גלגולי הזמנים והוראת קץ המגולה של התיישבות ארץ ישראל. Look at the connection. Before the first world war, he was the rabbi of Jaffa. He was in Eretz Israel. And he wrote to the rabbis in Europe before the war that there are clear signs of Geula in Eretz Israel. According to the Talmud, קץ המגולה, אין את זה, אני חושב, בירושלמי, את המושג קץ המגולה, נדמה לי רק בבבלי, רבי אבא, עוד שהוא אמורה, רבי אבא הוא אמורה ארץ ישראלי, אבל דבריו לא מופיעים, נדמה לי בירושלמי, that the main sign of Geula is that the land of Israel becomes fertile again, full of trees and flowers and people coming back, and Jews coming back, and the land becomes again fertile and fruitful. And this happened before World War I. Now he sees the connection. Look, there is a beginning of Geula in Eretz Israel, and now there is war. And these are the two signs of Geula: wars on one hand, and the renewal of settlements or Jewish settlements in Eretz Israel. So we can see that the war is not something that is not connected, but it is connected to Geula, and it will bring Geula to a higher level. בדעה גדולה, I'm reading, בדעה גדולה, גבורה עצומה, ובהיגיון עמוק וחודר, בתשוקת אמת ורעיון בהיר, צריכים אנו לקבל את התוכן הנישא של אור השם המתגלה בפעולה נפלאה בעלילות המלחמות הללו. We should be open to these wars. We mentally, psychologically, we have to accept these wars, not to regard these wars as something negative, as just a catastrophe, terrible catastrophe in which millions of Jews die. But we have also, in spite of the pain, to appreciate אור השם המתגלה בפעולה נפלאה בעלילות המלחמות הללו. We have to appreciate that this is an essential and an integral part of Geula. And that's why, in spite of the fact, we have to be to rejoice. We have to be full of joy with these wars, because we know that step after step, Geula advances through war after war. It's connected. Next war, next step for Geula, next level, next stage. And it is, although we sometimes we don't understand it fully, it's an integral part, essential part of the process. We have the writings of Gaon Vilna 200 years ago that wrote that option was closed, that the Jewish people לא זכו, זכו ממנני שמיה, לא זכו, אני ורוכב על חמור. We have not succeeded to realize the option of Geula without pain, without wars, without agony. So what's left is the option of Geula through wars. And this is the only option in our time, and that's why we have to be, first of all, to be prepared for these wars. And I'm saying it because maybe we still have wars ahead. Who knows? And what Rav Kook said 100 years ago, I believe, is absolutely relevant for our time. In spite of the pain, the wars are essential. And if we want to have less pain, we have to act as much as we can to promote the process of Geula, to be more faithful to the will of God, in order to make Geula faster and make in this sense easier. We can act, we can have impact on this process, but there is no way to get rid of the wars as part of the process. This is, I think, the main idea. This is what he has to say in this chapter. It's a wonderful chapter. We don't have time to read it all. Read it at home. Even if you don't understand it fully, I hope that you will get some. I hope you will get at least the spirit of this chapter, a spirit which doesn't legitimize war. It just prophesies. It's kind of prophecy. It says, this is what's going to happen, and the result will not only be negative in terms of Am Israel, it will have great results for the fulfillment of the prophecy of Acharit Hayamim, of what's written in the Bible. Okay, I was clear enough, I hope. Rav Kook is clear enough, although his language is very complicated. He uses many verbs, many phrases from the Bible, but I think the main idea, and from Chazal and Kabbalah.
הקטע הזה לא קשה.
הקטע הזה לא מאוד קשה. הקטע הזה לא מאוד קשה, אתם תראו בהמשך, קטעים קצת יותר קשים, אבל הרעיון העיקרי הוא קצת ככה, מקטע לקטע הוא מנסה קצת יותר להסביר חורבן אירופה, מה יקרה באירופה, התמוטטות התרבות האירופית, השקר של התרבות הגרמנית, ובאמת הוא מדבר ממש כמו נביא, שכל מה שהוא כותב פה, בתחילת מלחמת העולם הראשונה, ממש הכל התגשם, זה ממש מדהים. תודה רבה, thank you.